A three-way Republican race for the U.S. Senate, the incumbent John McCain.
I'm proud of my record for Arizona, and I have enough experience and knowledge to continue that.
The physician and military wife, Kelli Ward.
I have real life experience outside politics. I think that that's missing from many people, especially people who have been there for decades. They forget what real life is like.
And Clara Van Steenwyk, the retiree running for 2 federal seats.
I'm from the real world of work and charitable giving and helping.
Candidates weigh in before the August 31st primary. This is Arizona Week. Hello, and thanks for joining us. The August 31st primary is right around the corner. Early ballots are out and voices of the voters are about to be heard. Arizona's Senate seat is up for grabs. 3 candidates are in the Republican race. John McCain has held the seat for more than 30 years. Dr. Kelli Ward, though, a former state legislator, says it's time to retire John McCain. And Clara Van Steenwyk is running for Congress and the Senate, saying Arizona is due for a change. First on our program, John McCain. Polls show he has the lead. One of Arizona's longest-serving senators, he's held the office since 1987. A decorated Vietnam veteran, the Republican nominee for president in 2008. Senator McCain sat down with Arizona Public Media's Andrea Kelli.
Senator, what's the key issue in your re-election campaign, and how does that distinguish you from the other 3 Republicans running?
One is national security. The nation is under attack, and according to the Director of National Intelligence and the head of the CIA, there will be further attacks on the United States of America. First time since December 7th, 1941, except for, of course, 9/11. And the other is our environment, fire and water. Fire and water are the challenges for Arizona, for our children and our grandchildren. 20% of our national forests have been burned by fire in the last 10 years. Our water, we're running out of water, and we have an enormous challenge if we're going to have an adequate water supply and national forests that exist.
And assuming you win the primary, how will you campaign against Democrat Ann Kirkpatrick?
Same way, defending the nation. Chairman of the Armed Services Committee, I've been involved in every major national security issue and challenge, and of course what I've done and will do for the state, whether it be the realignment of the road out here so that we can expand Tucson International Airport and Raytheon can expand, to Yuma Heritage Crossing, where we now have native flora and fauna, to the fish hatchery up at Mojave County, or the new mine out at Superior that will provide 25% of the nation's copper supply. All of those things, I'm proud of my record for Arizona, and I have enough experience and knowledge to continue that.
You have a birthday coming at the end of August. You'll turn 80 years old. What drives you to continue to serve?
I thought a lot about it, and I thought that the primary reason was national security and what can I do to help Arizona through what is arguably some very difficult challenges. But I must say that national security is a very important factor. We are under attack. There will be more attacks on the United States of America. There is a refugee flow in Europe that is dismembering the European Union. Vladimir Putin is dismembering Ukraine. The Chinese are acting in the most aggressive fashion in the South China Sea, that they are asserting sovereignty over international waters. Obviously, the Middle East is on fire as ISIS metastasizes throughout the region and the world.
How will you know when it's time for you to step down and pass that torch to someone else?
Well, I will leave that to the judgment of the voters, and again, I will make a strong case that, as opposed to, say, even 6 years ago when I last ran, the world is very different. When this president came to the presidency, we had a quiet world, and we had won the conflict in Iraq and Afghanistan. And thanks to his failed policies, called leading from behind, we now have a world on fire. We had it won in Iraq. He pulled everybody out. Al-Qaeda went to Syria, became ISIS, and now we have attacks on the United States of America.
You have supported Donald Trump for president, albeit with some reluctance or some caution because of some of the things he's said, including about you personally. Do you see him changing?
I don't know. I don't know. I really don't know. All I know is that I said I would support the nominee of the party, but I have very strong differences with Donald Trump, but I have very strong differences, more strong differences with Hillary Clinton, who I believe as Secretary of State was partially, as to some degree, responsible for the international debacle we're in today.
How does his candidacy at the top of the ticket, how does that affect races like yours in Arizona?
I don't think it affects mine very much because I have 100% name ID in Arizona. I don't think that there's any doubt that there will be a larger turnout of the Hispanic voter in this election, I believe. But I have a long relationship with the Hispanic community. I've been endorsed by the National Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And so I don't think it affects me a great deal, but it obviously affects some voters who just are straight ticket voters.
Let's move on to immigration. You've helped support and introduce some comprehensive immigration bills in the past. In 2013, it passed the Senate but died in the House. So where do you stand now? And I'm going to go back to Trump again on his proposal for a wall.
Well, I mean, it doesn't work. What works is sufficient border patrol, sufficient surveillance, sufficient interior enforcement as well. We have made significant improvements in border security, particularly in the construction of towers that can see many sections of our border. So I just, if you've ever, I'm sure that some people have visited China or read about China. The Chinese built a Great Wall at one point. That didn't work either. And we have to do a number of other things. One of them is, of course, is E-Verify. That means that anyone who applies for a job has got to have a document that proves they're in this country legally. If a person hires someone that doesn't have that document, then that employer has to be prosecuted. Second of all, let's not ignore one fundamental fact. 40% of the people who are in this country illegally didn't come across our border. They came on a visa and the visa expired. That's why this E-Verify program is so very important. Finally, could I mention, there is a new real serious problem, and that is this manufactured heroin that is manufactured in Mexico that is flooding the Northeast and the Midwest to the point where various governors have said it's an epidemic. And it is killing a whole lot of people. It's easy to smuggle because it's not like marijuana in big bales. So we're going to have to look at that problem and issue. And it isn't just border enforcement. It is also the fact that there's a demand for it. And Economics 101 show that if there's a demand for a product, there will be a supply sooner or later. So we've got a real education issue about this manufactured heroin.
Does there need to be specific legislation?
There's got to be a comprehensive approach, and it's part of this opioids problem, which is really a very serious problem all over the United States today. I'm happy to say with Congress, we took some action on it.
Are you working on, or if reelected, do you have any plans for a comprehensive immigration reform part 2? Or attempt 2?
One of the more interesting facts proving the old adage that life isn't fair, in 2009, Barack Obama had 60 votes in the United States Senate, overwhelming majority in the House of Representatives. And what did he do? He took up Obamacare, stimulus package, Dodd-Frank. Never once did he propose comprehensive immigration reform, which he could have done, as he did with those other pieces of legislation, without any Republican votes. Sooner or later, we will address the issue of 11 million people in this country that are not in a legal status. We will have to address it one way or the other. I'm hoping that we can have a secure border, a path to citizenship that means fines, that means background checks, it means back taxes, it means getting behind everybody else, a very tough path to citizenship. We are going to have to do that sooner or later. But we also have to have a secure border, because the American people have to have the confidence that, unlike when Ronald Reagan gave amnesty to 6 million people, that there just won't be a renewed number of people who come illegally.
McCain's toughest competition, polls show, is Kelli Ward, a physician, former state legislator, mother, and military wife. Dr. Ward says her real-life experiences make her the perfect person to retire John McCain.
He's been in Washington, D.C. for almost 40 years. And I don't think that the founders of our country ever envisioned us having an elite ruling political class. And so if for no other reason, I think it's time for a change. And the only way we change Washington is by changing the people we send there. Now, of course, I have a lot of policy disagreements with Senator McCain as well. I'm a small government, low taxes, strong military, personal responsibility, follow the Constitution kind of candidate. And, you know, unfortunately, over time, he's become a big government, big spender, voting for tax hikes, voting for bailouts. He supports amnesty. I don't. He's put a lot of liberal judges on the bench. And so I think those are some of the things policy-wise people in Arizona are pretty fed up with Senator McCain. And so I'm offering a different perspective.
John McCain is your strongest competitor. Do you respect, do you admire his experience, his background as a senator?
Well, I think I have all the respect in the world for him, for his service to our country, for what he went through as a POW. But he simply isn't the conservative he claims to be, especially at campaign time. You know, he comes back to Washington. He comes back from Washington to Arizona, takes a picture with a cactus, says a few words about the veterans, promises to secure the border, and then expects everybody in Arizona to believe that he's going to do those things and then go back. But I think the people aren't going to have the wool pulled over their eyes this time.
What are some of the issues that you think you will take as senator from Arizona to Washington?
Well, I'll tell you that one of the main reasons why I ran for office is because 6 years ago, John McCain walked along the border and said, you know, let's build the dang fence. And then when he got to Washington, he went straight to the Gang of Eight and the amnesty bill that has really upset many people in Arizona. I think it actually led to his censure in 2014 by the Republican Party. So people inside the party apparatus were so upset with that they went as far as to censure a sitting U.S. senator. And so border security definitely is one of my #1 priorities. I do say I'd like to mix the mortar to fix the border, and that, you know, that's kind of something that's a soundbite that will stick with people. But you know, there are many things that we need to do to be able to secure that border so that when people want to come here and they want to legally get into our country, it's easier for that to happen because people who have come illegally aren't blocking the system and making it more difficult. So border security is definitely there. I'm a physician, you know, I'm a family doctor. I owned my own practice for about 10 years with my mom, who's a pediatrician. We had a wonderful mother-daughter practice together. And Obamacare is really the thing that pushed me into running for office in the first place, because it is the biggest takeover of healthcare liberty and freedom that we will ever see in our lifetimes, not only for my profession, but for all of us as patients. And so we need an alternative to Obamacare. I want to fully repeal Obamacare, and I want to let the free market get back into the medical arena so that we as patients can get the health care that we want and the health care that we need, rather than waiting for the government to provide some small amount of health care that they think is reasonable. So, and I have a plan called the Patient Power Plan. People can see it on my website, kelliward.com. The next thing is, of course, I think it's on everyone's mind, the economy, making sure that we start stimulating some growth in the economy. We've seen, you know, pretty dismal growth over the last, 7-8 years, and even back into George W. Bush. We need to be at about a 4% growth rate to have prosperity across the board, across every socioeconomic level, and that's what I'd love to see. That's going to come from some tax reform. It's going to come from shrinking parts of government, and it's going to come from decreasing regulation on some places in our system those regulations are stifling the economic development and economic growth that we could have. And then the last priority that I have is, and well, first on my mind, first in my heart, but last on this this list is finally fixing the Veterans Administration. My husband is in the military. He's been in for the last 32 years. And as a military wife of a guy who has been to the desert, has been rocketed in Iraq, I know that it is important for us to take care of our veterans once their service ends. And we need to start honoring those promises to our veterans. And we've fallen down on the job. So we've got to stop talking about it. We've got to stop holding press conferences and writing letters, which Senator McCain is notorious for. And we've got to start acting to make sure that those guys get what they want and what they need.
What about your background in the state legislature makes you the perfect person for this position?
Well, you know, I have real life experience outside politics. I think that that's missing from many people, especially people who have been there for decades. They forget what real life is like. And I think, you know, not only my legislative experience, but also as a wife, as a mom, as a family physician, as a business owner, and then finally as an Arizona State Senator. I think that that combination really comes together nicely to be able to serve the people of our state.
How would you describe Republicans in Arizona? What do they want right now?
They want a secure border. They want term limits, and I think that one of those reasons is because we have a senator who's been there since 1982. You know, he's been there long term, and I think that a lot of people, you know, I get a lot of messages on our website, on Facebook, on Twitter, that basically say that John McCain's the poster boy for term limits. Definitely, it is probably the most asked question that I get on the campaign trail is whether I support them or not, and I do. You know, Arizonans also want America to be great again, and I think that's why we saw Donald Trump win so decisively in the Republican primary here in our state. And so, you know, they're looking for the American dream. They want us to come back to life. They want us to have that secure border, strong military, strong economy, fix the VA, and I think that they believe that the Republican Party can bring that.
Coming up on the primary, voters will see 4 names on the Republican primary. Would you consider yourself more conservative than the other options that people will see on the ballot?
Well, one guy is not even in the race, Molesky. So everyone, I hope, will remember Molesky is not in the ballot in the race any longer, and I hope that people won't waste their vote by voting for Alex Molesky. Clair is a man, and he's run for office several times. He's actually running for 2 federal offices at this time. He's running for both the House and the United States Senate, and I think that shows people that that's not really a serious candidate. And so between Senator McCain and Dr. Kelli Ward, definitely I'm the more conservative, reliably Republican choice. I'm the person that will go there and work for the people and not forget who I work for.
How do you assure the voters that what you're saying today is what you would take to Washington, and this is not just a lip service?
Yeah, well, you know, I have a record to prove in what I've done. I definitely do not have a career in politics. You know, I think my career as a wife and a mom and a doctor is more than enough. I will tell you, I build my life on my faith, my family, my profession. There are things that can't be taken away, can't be broken. And while I look forward to the election, those are the things that are very important. But when I was in Phoenix, truly, I stood up to my principles. I looked back because, you know, now we have social media and you can look back to things from 6 years ago, 5 years ago, you know, years in the making. And my principles at that time are solid, are solid. And the way that I represented my district and the state when I was in the legislature is what I will take to Washington, D.C.
The third candidate is Clara Van Steenwyk. Polls show he's trailing in the primary. Van is a retiree, his experience in business and as a radio host. Van is also running for the U.S. House. Clara Van Steenwyk says polling doesn't always indicate who will win a race, and he says he's committed to serving in federal office. Let's begin with why you, why not Kelli Ward, why not John McCain?
Basically, I have never held public office. I've been active in politics most of my life. Actually, I worked on Dwight David Eisenhower's campaign when I was 9 years old. I have watched Senator McCain and Senator Ward very closely. Senator McCain has made promises he hasn't kept. The Veterans Administration is a mess. He has allowed things to go on both with the veterans and our overseas. We have an unsecure border. He promised to secure it. He seemed to be more concerned with the security overseas than he is with the security on our own bases. We have terrorists coming in our southern borders. We have overstayed visas. We have illegals walking in. We have guns coming across our borders, drugs coming across our borders. We have a drug epidemic in this country because of cheap heroin that's coming from Mexico, and it doesn't seem to bother the people in office. Mr. McCain, I believe, is just out of touch and has been for a long time, and I believe he knows that. But every 6 years when he runs, he comes back as this great conservative, which he is not, and that's my main reason for running against him. He's been there far too long, he's out of touch, and he needs to go. As far as former Senator Ward goes, she, I believe, will do the same thing in Washington that she did in Arizona. She voted for bills stripping the Superintendent of Education's authority and handing it over to a governor-appointed board, which is no different than people complaining about all the people that Mr. Obama appoints. They're czars. Well, we have a board of czars over education. The people don't vote for them. We vote for a superintendent of instruction. Authority was stripped away from that office, not a person, the office. That's what I object to. And according to state statutes of Arizona and Arizona Constitution, that wasn't supposed to happen. They made a political deal with the governor to do it on that issue. When we got it killed on HB 2184, which Ward amended, they then snuck it in during the night on SB 1469, and Ward and 14 other Republicans voted to do this. This is not serving the people of Arizona. Whether they're Democrats or independents or Republicans is not relevant. It's their voters. We are citizens, and we elect people to serve us, not to serve the parties.
Politics is not,
And
excuse me, so sorry to interrupt. Politics is not in your background, in your resume. Does that help or hurt you in this campaign?
I believe it actually helps me, because I've run businesses. I had a political talk show. I've been politically active for years. I also ran a charitable organization in California, reaching out on Skid Row and Hollywood Boulevard, and we had a missionary work down in Mexico, my wife and myself and some others. It was totally self-financed. We helped people. Many people other people wouldn't even talk to. We tried to help, and a lot of them we did help. I'm from the real world of work and charitable giving and helping. But these people that are in office think because they vote on one thing, they're some kind of, I don't know, warrior, and they're not. Most of them vote politically to make themselves look good so they can say, I'm a conservative. And then when you look at the rest of their voting record, there's nothing conservative about it. I'm a constitutional conservative Republican. That's what I am. But the Constitution doesn't tell me I can compromise our rights away, and that's what they do. And they do it every day in Washington and in Phoenix and in Sacramento and Des Moines, Iowa. These people vote away our rights and smile and say it's the best deal they can get. You know, I negotiated contracts with corporations like Walmart and Safeway and Fry's or Kroger Markets and other big food chains. And I didn't compromise my company just to get a deal. And I don't believe they need to compromise our rights just so they can come back and say, we got this done. Our trade deals are bad with other countries. We now have a $60 billion deficit with Mexico. $60 billion. Before NAFTA, we were at a plus on that thing. This is nuts. And then you got what's going on with the Asia TPP. And if you look at Europe with the refugee problem over there and what's going on there, we are bleeding money and jobs out of our country. I went to work as a kid at 9 years old. I could get a job delivering handbills, but I could get one. I worked my way up the ladder from washing bottles at a dairy to being a vice president of the company. You can't hardly do that anymore because there's no starter jobs.
Claire,
we've got rid of all of them. We've exported them.
Claire, the polls at this point, not necessarily in your favor. What do you need to do to ramp up that voter interest to get voters to vote for you in the next week?
I realize the professional polls don't reflect that, but then again, the polls didn't reflect Mr. Trump winning the primary either. Mr. Bush, I think, was supposed to win that. I depend on people more than I do on the press. The press has been vacant in this. I'm glad for this interview, but for the most part, during this whole election cycle, the U.S. Senate race has not been covered well by Arizona's press, either the printed press or the media. And it's sad because it's a major election in this state. I would say it's just as important as what's going on with Mr. Trump, because my fear is this state elects the wrong person to go to Washington again, whether the House or the Senate, and he's not going to get allies. Mr. Trump has a program of wanting to shut the border down and do this and do that and get rid of these bad trade deals. If you send incumbents back to Washington that voted for these things, I don't see them voting to get rid of them.
You're running for Senate and Congress. Kelli Ward, one of your competitors, has said that indicates that you may not be taking one race very seriously. How do you respond to that?
Well, for me not taking one race real seriously, let's see, I've traveled down to Benson, Arizona. I've traveled to Yuma. I've traveled out to Kingman. I've traveled out to Flagstaff, Prescott, Payson, Cottonwood, Tonopah, Quartzsite, all over the Phoenix area and other areas to run for the U.S. Senate. We did this because we were asked to do the Senate race. While we were doing the Senate race, a number of people in CD8 where I live asked me if I wouldn't please run against Mr. Franks again, which we had done a couple of years ago, and didn't do too badly, actually, without any help from the party, I might add. So we did that. We tried to find other people to run against Mr. Franks because he indeed has a poor record. He's only gotten 10 bills passed in his 14 years, and one of those was thrown out by the Supreme Court. And he still wants to close the new casino in the West Valley, and he's in agreement with Franks and Flake, who I believe are in the pockets of the tribes, but that's another issue.
Which race
and
then?
I am taking both serious. I'm taking them seriously, but you got to look at it like this. I look at it this way. When I used to work in the real world, if I could apply for a job, and I applied at some companies, they had a district manager's job open or a sales manager's job open, or both, and I was qualified to do both, I applied for both, and then I let the management of that company decide which job I could get. And I look at the Senate and the House differently. They're the same basic jobs with the same basic legislation. However, one's 2 years, one's 6. One's a statewide race. One's a local race like you'd run for county supervisor. I believe you can do both. I can walk and chew gum at the same time. I know a lot of politicians want to make this look like I don't care. Think about it. They're both federal jobs. We got over 10,000 signatures to run for the Senate. We got 3,999 to run for the House. And we did it by ourselves. We didn't buy signatures. We didn't pay people to get them. We got them. My opponents didn't do that. They bought signatures. So if somebody doesn't think I'm serious, you try sitting out in the sun at 110 degrees in the open day getting signatures at a table for 6 hours and tell me I'm not serious.
Early voting has already begun for the August 31st primary. Whoever wins the primary will face Democrat Ann Kirkpatrick. She's unopposed in the primary. Ann Kirkpatrick is an attorney and former state legislator. Polls show a neck-and-neck race between her and John McCain. And that's our program. You can count on Arizona Week to provide a regular analysis of the upcoming election. Next week, we'll take a look at how the Green and Libertarian parties are positioning themselves to capture voter attention this election. For all of us at Arizona Public Media, I'm Lorraine Rivera. Thanks for joining us.